Welcome to the podcast. We do recover with Jared Miller, your host.
And I'm Dr. Terry Sellers, your co-host.
This is a podcast about recovery from addiction.
We want to talk about what successful recovery can look like.
Brought to you by Steps Recovery Center and the St. George Hilton Garden Inn.
Here we go. We are underway with episode 97. How weed became the new Oxycontin. That is the title of an article that we're going to get into a little bit later on in this episode. And listen, Doc, I think this is going to be kind of a controversial episode.
It for sure is.
Right? Like there's going to be... Listen, I ran this in group at residential, day treatment, and night IOP. And the title caught so many people so strongly in the groups that I ran it in. And, you know, it's going to be good. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, here's we're not getting into the article yet, but here's the problem is I'm going to guess, and I wasn't at any of your groups, but I'm going to guess that every one of the people that not everyone, most of the people that didn't like the title are now defending marijuana, which is an interesting thing coming from people who are in treatment for drug and alcohol addiction, right?
Yeah, and I would say it was probably 50. It's probably 50%. Some of the people just didn't like the title because there's no way you could compare marijuana to Oxycontin. But we'll get into it. We'll get into it. Listen, either way, it's clickbait, right? Either way,
for sure.
It grabs people's attention. That's why you pulled the article.
Yeah, I'm the one that brought this article, and I probably clicked on it because I read that, and I'm like, come on. You can't compare that to Oxycontin. But we'll get into some stuff that's interesting.
I'm excited. Did you know that episode 97, part 1, is brought to us by Steps Recovery Centers? Steps Recovery Centers is ready to help you or a loved one get help as soon as you're ready to reach out. Reach out by giving them a call at 801-800-8142, or just go directly to their website and you can live chat with somebody. That's stepsrc.com. They have detox, inpatient, day treatment, night IOP, GOP, alumni. From start to finish, they got you covered. Go ahead and reach out if your loved one needs help. We appreciate them sponsoring this podcast. Episode 97, part 1 is also brought to us by Rise Up Supplements. Rise Up Supplements is a nootropic line that helps mental health. We have 2 products. I actually brought you guys both products today, right? We got Dr. Sellers rocking the Mindful Mood, which helps decrease anxiety and enhance mood. And then I brought Sean some Mind Shift, which helps increase focus and optimize brain function. Listen, nootropics are non-psychoactive. I actually had somebody reach out and say, how do you do a recovery podcast and you're promoting nootropic? Okay, nootropic doesn't mean psychoactive, right? Like there's some mushrooms in the mind.
Okay, I just took some of this stuff. I'm now reading some of Stephen Hawking's writings. I understand it all.
Well, I took the other stuff, and I can't even remember who Stephen Hawking is.
Oh, you guys are killing me. So did you know, I'm going to start off with new and goods because it wraps into our sponsorship mention.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
I got a little lion's mane going. Mm-hmm. I got myself a little rhodiola. I got some, oh man, that's small type for me. Some rose hip extract. I'm feeling good.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't even want to pronounce what's in the Mind Shift because it's...
You got some stuff.
Yeah.
Like
peptide.
I actually could probably pronounce it. I just can't read it. It's too small.
Yeah. So my new and good is my sweet wife, Mandy, turns 30.
Wait.
What happened?
Sean.
Yeah.
Can you hit a button for me? Oh, I caught him off guard. Sorry.
New and good.
Yeah.
Wow, we were all off.
I just like it.
I saw that Oxycontin and weed.
I didn't know that we were ready for new and goods yet. So, but Jared led into it. So, Jared, what's new and good?
I forgot about that. Thanks, Doc. We need the official button.
Yeah, I like the button. That's why I wanted him to push it. I like it.
It's like Jesus finally told my dad he's good enough.
And good.
All right, let's get to it. So my new and good that wraps into the sponsorship mention is my sweet wife, Mandy, turns 30 tomorrow.
That is not possible.
30 years old, man.
29.
She's
Yeah,
29.
she's never
29.
gonna, yeah, it's going to be a long time before she turns 30, my friend.
So
She's got about 7 years of 29 still.
She's always 29, and you're Methuselah +1.
I don't even know what that means.
well,
but we'll roll with
Methuselah
it.
was 900 and some,
He's
almost
the
1,000
oldest
years
man
old.
in the Bible.
Okay. All
so
right.
there we go. You always have to say that. Anyway, so it's her birthday, and she's
Yes.
turning 29.
Yeah. No, she's turning 30.
No,
okay?
she's not.
finally in my age
No,
bracket.
She's not. Don't.
This is going to help you remember that if you go to riseupsups.com, that's riseupsups.com, at checkout, you can save yourself 30% off for the month of October by putting B Day 30. So capital B, capital Day 30, save yourself 30% off at checkout.
Everybody that wants some supplements now knows your wife is 30.
That's right.
I don't know if you might be sleeping on the couch tonight, my friend.
No, she's excited about it. She's ready.
I think you should be offering people 29% off, frankly.
Hey, does the dog sleep on the couch?
Yes.
Probably
Yes.
explains the pink eye.
Got the
Probably.
pink eye going. Yeah.
Thank you for bringing up, my medical records are not safe on this podcast.
There's no HIPAA here.
There's no HIPAA here. Sean's not your doctor.
Oh,
He's got no
man.
HIPAA violations.
So let's go to Sean. Sean, what's your new and good?
For the last minute, I've been thinking about that, and I thought my new and good. My good is that.
Wait, were you able to hold a thought for a whole minute?
Yeah. Well, now that I'm taking Rise Up Sups, I can hold my thoughts.
Oh my gosh.
I am happy and thankful that I have so many things that I can do, even though those things bog me down. I have the opportunity to do them, so therefore, that's my new and good.
Oh, you're in gratitude today, my friend.
Yeah.
Well, listen,
I'm trying not to lose my crap. Actually,
It's actually a good place to be. But
we're not grateful because this podcast gets shifted around left and right and up and down and forwards and backwards.
works for me.
I'm being old and bad
See,
here.
the
I'm
nice
being
thing
a
about a
grump.
podcast is people can listen to the podcast at any time that they
Remember-
want, any
That's
day,
true.
any time, a year from now.
Remember the gratitude he just showed, and you going, bitch.
Wow.
I know. We're gonna have to edit that out.
Crap on my parade.
Is bitch have to? Do we have to edit
Yeah,
that word
that's-
out?
This goes on the radio, Doc.
Oh, I'm
That's
sorry.
2. Keep going. I'm gonna put markers there so I can edit them later. Anything else you want to say that I can edit out?
I said glitch twice.
All right, Doc. Let's get your new and good. What's
I
happening
got
in
two-
the
I got
world of
two-
Doc
I
Sellers?
got two new and goods. The first is actually the time that we're doing the podcast today is really good for me because I'm from here leaving to go to Las Vegas to watch a football game. BYU's playing Notre Dame, and
Viva Las
I'm
Vegas.
going to go down there and put all my money on black and probably come back broke.
So you got your wildest outfits prepared?
Oh, I got some outfits.
For those of you that know Doc Sellers, he wears some pretty wild outfits.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm confused. You're going to Vegas to watch a BYU Notre Dame game?
Oh, now, okay.
Are they playing down there?
Thanks for nope. I'm just going to go down there and watch. Yes, they are. They're playing at Allegiant Stadium, and it's a very long story. It's a Notre Dame. Well, it was supposed to be a BYU home game, but it turns out to be a Notre Dame home game in Las Vegas.
Sean,
Notre Dame. It's
Okay,
not
so let's
listen, you know these LDS guys.
Let
Any
me-
excuse to get to Vegas, they're going to Vegas.
we
You
didn't
know?
do it. We didn't do
Oh,
this.
come on now.
So here's what
Come on,
happened.
guys. We're going to go to Vegas and get some caffeinated Coke. Woo! Living large.
Here's what happened. We signed a home and home with Notre Dame. We fly to South Bend, Indiana, and we play there. It's now time to come to Provo. Somehow Notre Dame, which has
Doesn't want to come to Provo. I get it.
right. That's exactly what happened. No, that's exactly what happened, right? But Notre Dame, who has all the power in college football, if you compare them to BYU, decided, nope, we're not coming to Provo. We are going to declare this part of our Shamrock series, which means we get to pick the neutral site, and we control 80% of the tickets for your home game. So
Listen.
BYU got 20% of the tickets. They got 80%, and it's in Vegas.
That's
But
what
it's going to be a
happens-
sold-out game, though, right?
for sure.
no,
Half of Utah.
Notre Dame is not sell. We only got 20% of the tickets.
Oh.
Notre Dame got 80%, and they did not sell out their 80%.
Really?
So it's going to be close.
That's what
and I'm sure
happens.
BYU people are buying
Well, they got
up
that
Notre Dame
second
tickets, but-
temple going up in Vegas, so they'll be able to
got-
sell tickets there or something.
for sure.
That's what happens when
Right
you have
outside the temple, I'm
when,
sure.
when you have touchdown Jesus, you can do whatever you want, right? Like they have touchdown Jesus.
I got a picture of me right in front of touchdown Jesus.
I have the same picture.
Do you?
Yeah,
It's a
me
cool
and Manny
picture.
went there just
Yeah.
like a few months ago.
Really?
Sean, do you got touchdown Jesus in your life?
No.
Well,
No.
I got a picture in front of it. We went to a BYU.
I had
Notre
to talk
Dame
to the
game
cops
there.
and DCFS about that, so there's no touchdown Jesus in my life.
Well, there you go.
All right.
Let's get.
Did you have another new and good? That was your one.
Oh yeah, no, I do. Thanks for reminding me. Sobriety Foundation. We have a good friend on the Sobriety
Yes.
Foundation board. Her name is Susan Peterson. She's been on the podcast and a friend of the podcast, and she always leaves nice comments. And
Beautiful lady inside and out.
yep, they
Don't tell
have.
my wife I said that.
They have. No, she's beautiful. She's not more beautiful than your
I
wife.
know. I'm just
Not
being
more beautiful than my wife either.
facetious.
But I
She is. She's
I talked to her husband last night, and she's more beautiful to him than anyone else. I'm
Sure.
Anyway, they have their annual fundraiser tonight. Their speakeasy. Remember, you and I went last year.
Yep. That was a blast.
Yeah, it was fun. It's a fun event. They have a lot of cool things that they auction off. They have some entertainment. They have speakers. Todd Sylvester is the speaker this year. He's one of the speakers. And then Paul Cardall, who's a piano player, is the musical artist for the thing. And that's tonight. If anyone is in the Salt Lake area, it's at the Grand America. And it is at, I think it's at, 7 o'clock. They still have tickets available. You can show up if you want.
If not, check out their online auction.
But the online auction is cool, yeah.
Me and Mandy last year bid on just like some stool chairs, some like bar stool chairs for
Yeah,
a
yeah,
little
yeah.
countertop.
I got those too.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got them at a
They're
killer
green, right?
deal.
The green ones?
No, we got metal black ones.
Oh, I got metal green.
Okay.
Yeah.
Killer. I think we paid like less than $100 for
Right.
four
right,
chairs.
for 4 of them, right.
It was like nobody bid on them, so we
Right.
walked away. It was a
Yeah.
steal.
Same thing.
How
I
do,
got the
where,
same
where's
thing.
it? How do they find the online auction? We can post it in
So
the
sobrietyfoundation.org is online, and you can get to the auction through that.
fantastic. And hey, good luck to oh man, I just blanked. Todd Sylvester.
Todd Sylvester.
Good luck tonight, buddy.
And,
Great
and
dude.
I got to be honest with you, there's a problem with this. I'm on the Sobriety Foundation board.
Mhm.
I'm supposed to be at the speakeasy tonight, but
Yeah.
I bought these BYU Notre Dame tickets like over a year ago. So
And Susan, I'm sorry. It's my wife's birthday weekend, so her family's coming down here last year. But next year I will be there for sure. The next time we will be there.
me too.
All right, let's jump into this thing. How Weed Became the New Oxycontin by
Okay. We got it.
who's the author? I'm
Leighton
not-
Woodhouse.
Leighton Woodhouse. Thank
Yep.
you for helping me out here.
Yep.
Now we've talked about this is basically clickbait. So for those of you that don't know, I'm a substance abuse counselor. I work at Steps Recovery Centers, and I did a group on this at every single level. So residential, day treatment, night IOP, and I got some pretty strong reactions, just based on the title. How is it, Doc, that they are comparing the marijuana movement to OxyContin? How are they drawing those parallels?
Well, I mean, you're right. I think it's clickbait. It's not OxyContin, but I think part of the reason they made the comparison is some of the things that we're seeing out of people smoking weed or using marijuana in any form in this day and age, and so
I think too, like when you look at the comparison of big tobacco, that was like what in the
Right.
70s and 80s,
right,
to big pharma,
right,
right, which was the OxyContin thing. OxyContin marketed it as safe, non-addictive, the best thing since sliced bread, right?
right.
To now you look at what they're doing with marijuana, and they're basically
Right.
claiming it to be a cure-all medication.
Sure.
Maybe that's how they're drawing the parallels.
Well, that's part of the parallel. I think that you made a good point because the article points out a couple of things, and one is the people that are manufacturing and selling marijuana have learned a lot from big tobacco. They've learned
Marketing-wise.
how to market.
Mhm.
They've learned how to make their product more addictive, frankly. And we all know that big tobacco did that for a long time. Now, so did OxyContin, right? OxyContin came to market, and I was practicing medicine when OxyContin was first brought out, and the drug reps would come to my office and tell me how it was not addictive. how it was the best thing since sliced bread, and now people don't have to take a pill every 4 hours. They can take one in the morning and one before they go to bed, have their pain controlled all day long, and so the marketing stuff has been deceptive.
There's a whole series on Hulu about that.
Yeah, there is. It's a cool series.
Is it?
It's called what was that called? I watched it. It was fun, but it was.
I think it's Overdose. Oh man,
I can't remember what it was. Dang it!
Yeah,
but it was a good series on Hulu for sure. Yeah,
and it goes into all
About
the
Purdue
marketing. You know how they got the approval through the FDA to market it as non-addictive. So here's kind of my thing, and actually, I'm glad that you brought that up because it talks about in this article by Woodhouse how some of those old people that were in those circles are now dumping tons of money into
right.
marijuana production
Right.
and medical marijuana in these dispensaries and the grow farms and all the
Right.
different things, right? So
Big tobacco is
obviously,
putting money into
not only did they learn
marijuana
from
now.
them, they're getting financially
Right.
backed
Right.
from a lot of those people,
Right.
which I found was crazy interesting, right?
Sure.
Like those people know how to make money.
Right.
They're not going to be putting thousands and maybe even millions of dollars into something that they're going to lose money on.
right for sure,
Interesting.
for sure.
Very interesting.
So I want to go with in the article. One of the things it points out. I'm going to do this part if that's all right.
Can we
now.
start
Or
off
do
with
you
just kind of the scare tactic at
Yeah,
first?
sure.
Well, I say scare tactic. It could be totally true, right? Because these are
It's
professionals
not scare
working in the
tactics.
field.
These are stories.
Okay, so, oh man, where was her name?
Stoit. Her last
Stoit.
name is Stoit. Libby Stoit is just retired actually, but was an addiction psychiatrist in Pueblo, Colorado.
For 30 years.
Yep.
She said, I started seeing people with the worst psychosis symptoms that I'd ever seen, she told me, and the worst delusions I had ever seen. That sounds like
Meth.
meth.
That should be meth.
She's talking about the only thing they tested positive for was THC.
Right. Right.
Interesting.
So
All right.
yeah.
Go ahead. Jump into the.
Yeah. So and the reason first of all she's on it is, or she's in the article is, one of the first states to legalize marijuana was Colorado.
Sure.
And she lives in Pueblo, Colorado, right? So people in Colorado were starting to see all kinds of stuff, and
it gives stories about that.
yeah. So they talk about this. They talk about
A guy jumping up on the
yeah.
ER table.
watch the
claiming
young guy
he's-
jump up on the table in the ER and strip naked and claiming he was the god of thunder and threatening to kill everyone in the room, including a couple of policemen. That's some psychosis.
That is some psychosis.
That's some psychosis. Talked about a guy who climbed a crane all the way to the top of the crane.
700 feet
Right.
high.
Then threatened to jump off. Fortunately, they talked him down and he didn't die. But
Later, he said he thought he was in a computer simulation such as The Matrix.
right,
Crazy.
right.
That definitely sounds like. And listen, we're not laughing at it. Like that's scary. That
it's-
definitely
but-
sounds like some psychosis.
But it's ridiculous, right?
yeah.
It's absolutely ridiculous what's going on. So anyway, where I wanted to start out with is, first of all, there's a lot of people that we talk to in treatment will come up with these excuses. It's all natural. It's a natural. It's just a plant. It's a plant.
It's organic.
It comes from the earth.
Mhm.
God invented it.
Mhm.
All of this sort of stuff, right? Well, one of the things the article points out is the following. First of all, I grew up in the 60s. I was born in 1959. I grew up in the 60s. I wasn't a teenager yet in the 60s. I was a little bit younger than being a teenager. But in the 60s, weed was associated with hippies.
Yeah.
Hippies would smoke weed.
Yeah.
Well, the weed that hippies were smoking in the 1960s was apparently about 2% THC.
2 to 5.
Yep. And they got it up to 5. Well, it got to 5 by the 90s, they're saying. So by the 90s, it was closer to 5%.
Okay, so like the hippie movement was, like you said, you were right.
2%, less than
2%.
hippies were typically smoking less than 2% THC. By the 90s, it was closer to 5%, and then by 2015, it was over 20% THC. So it quoted a public speaker who lost a kid who killed himself after cannabis use drove him into psychosis, and her quote is, "It's a freak plant that resembles nothing of what has existed in nature."
Today's.
So the excuse we hear all the time, oh, it's all natural. The plant itself that we're using right now isn't anywhere close to anywhere close to the plant that was found in nature.
Sure, because they found ways to crossbreed them. They found ways
Right.
to
They're
to-
doing all
to
kinds
enhance.
of genetic modifications and genetic breeding stuff. And so we're talking about we've gone from 2%, just the plant itself has gone from 2% in the 60s, 2% THC, to 20%. It's 10 times stronger, just the plant itself, since the 60s.
The other thing that I think is interesting too is if you take a look at any mind-altering substance, it all comes from nature at some point.
Oh,
Cocaine comes from the coca plant.
right.
Uh,
The only one that doesn't,
methamphetamine.
yeah, meth comes from ammonia and fertilizer and
Yeah, that's probably not organic, right?
coracine and yeah.
But I mean, the majority of them, when you look at it, opiates come from
Opium.
opioid. Yeah,
Opium, which opium comes from poppies.
Right.
Right?
That's
I mean,
organic.
That's a plant,
Right.
right?
So it's interesting. that-
cocaine.
Yeah.
People in South America walk around chewing cocaine leaves all the time. It's a plant.
Yep. So it's interesting that that's the defense because it's like, sure, they all do. Most of them, we'll say 99% of them, at some point have some type of organic.
Right. Right. My rebuttal when I hear that, first of all, is even if it was all natural, once you light it on fire and suck it into your lungs, you've kind of taken a bunch of the nature out of it. I mean, I don't know if God ever invented any plants that we're supposed to light on fire and suck into our lungs.
Good point. Also, I'm going to pause for a sec and say, listen, if you are pro marijuana, we're going to get into, like, I personally sit on neutral. I'm not on one side of the fence or the other. I just want to put that out there, right?
I'm on one side of the fence.
I think there needs to be more research done because I do think you look at things like Charlotte's Web, right? That 13-year-old girl that was having like 300 seizures a day. And then now listen, this is a lot of it is because of the hemp and the CBD, not the THC.
Right.
But there are some stories out there.
Redeeming qualities.
Yes.
There are some, yeah,
That
it
you
has
can't
some use.
say you can't completely deny that there's no medical use, which right now, because it's a Schedule I drug, that's what the
but let's,
federal government is saying.
but
What I'm getting at, we're going to get to why we feel like it's becoming a problem.
okay, but let's talk about that because you're pointing out that it might have some medical uses, right? Well, first of all, it's particularly so 13 states have ratified marijuana for use, right?
Recreational.
Many
and,
of them recreationally.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's not that's not medicine, right? We're talking about recreational use now, but some have ratified it for medication use, for use as a medicine, including Utah, right?
Yeah.
Well, how did we decide that marijuana was a medicine in Utah?
We voted.
About 4 years ago, we had a proposition that the citizenry voted on, and once the vote passed, then all of a sudden it's a medication.
Yeah.
How do you get your medication?
Through a doctor and then through a pharmacy.
Right? Okay.
I mean, that's how I get my medication.
okay. There's no other medicine on the planet that we've voted on to make it a medicine.
I never voted on any
like a
other
blood
medicines.
pressure med. Did you ever vote on those to make sure they were
I don't know.
like a
Sean,
diabetes? Insulin's a medicine now. Everybody want to vote?
did you vote on the time you had pink eye like I have pink eye? Did you vote on that to get that medication passed?
You mean like I went to the ballot and
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
no.
So he's got a good point.
But no, but to be a true democracy, we have to do that because we have to have the people decide what's important, not educated doctors. So if the
Right.
people believe it's okay, then
Right.
it's okay,
Right.
right?
That's a good point.
That's why we have a.
Which is not.
Oh,
really-
wait a second. That's why we're a republic, not a democracy. I'm sorry. Now we're getting into politics.
There you go.
I was just going to say that doesn't.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, the point is, so it's we're calling it a medicine, but it's been being treated like no other medicine on the entire planet has ever been treated before.
My other point to that is this: when we went through the, the big pandemic that just happened, COVID. Thank you.
COVID.
My brain is not
Oh,
working.
you must
today.
have COVID brain.
Well,
When we
you
were-
should try Rise Up supplements.
Mind
Rise Up
Shift.
supplements
Yeah.
will help you feel better and forget those things that you may have forgotten.
Optimize my brain
Ri-
function.
Rise Up supplements.
So when
.com. Rise Up subs. _ hashtag.
Well,
so when we were going through that crisis,
Sean, should we vote to see if it's a medicine? Rise up subs.
okay,
Let's see. I don't know. I got it for free, so yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Jared hates it when we freestyle like this, so let Jared get
It's
back to
okay.
it.
He's got the last 50 seconds. Go.
You can have it.
They came out with medications for COVID. They were coming out with medications, and everybody was saying these have not been FDA approved yet.
Right.
Well, guess what? Medical marijuana, quote unquote, is still and has never been FDA approved.
Right.
But millions of people, or hundreds of thousands of people, were dying from COVID, and we were all super worried about getting this FDA approval.
Yeah.
And yet, for how many years now, it's mind-boggling, because it's like you said, it makes no sense within the traditional logical forms of how we go about creating a medication.
Yep.
For that and more.
We're out of time in the first segment. That was
Man.
fun.
And
we
we're
got a lot
barely
to talk
getting
about.
into this.
Okay, well, join us after the break. We're going to hear from our sponsors, and we'll be back in about 30 seconds.
You are listening to We Do Recover with Jared Miller and co-hosted by Dr. Terry Sellers. We'll be right back after this short break with more of We Do Recover with Jared Miller, sponsored by Steps Recovery Center and the Hilton Garden Inn.
I'm Desmond Lomax, one of the clinical executives here at Steps Recovery, and once you become with the Steps family, you're just a part of the Steps family. A lot of us have overcome substances, overcome addiction, and now we're able to help other people. Second of all, we're also going to help you in a way where you can afford to be helped. Third of all, we're going to give you the same quality that many organizations are charging 2 to 3 times, and it's more about you than it is about our organization.
We welcome you back to We Do Recover with Jared Miller, co-hosted by Dr. Terry Sellers. Brought to you by Steps Recovery Center and the St. George Hilton Garden Inn. And now with part 2 of our podcast, Jared Miller and Dr. Terry Sellers.
Welcome back, everybody. Part 2, episode 97. We Do Recover with Jared Miller. We're talking about marijuana as the new OxyContin, which we've been talking about for a minute. But before we get back to that,
According
part
to this
2,
article.
Part 2, by the way, is sponsored by the Hilton Garden Inn. Have you ever been to the Hilton Garden Inn?
Love it. It's beautiful there.
place.
My
Yep.
all my in-laws are coming to town for my wife's 30th birthday,
Oh, fun.
which you can save 30% off. Okay, just kidding. Now I'm diving into this. They're all coming to town to celebrate her birthday, and guess where they're staying?
Steps Recovery Center?
The Hilton Garden Inn, baby.
Okay, Hilton Garden
Yeah,
Inn.
we're gonna enjoy that pool, that hot tub.
Oh, yeah, beautiful.
It's the best place to stay in Southern Utah, if you ask me.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. If you're coming through Southern Utah, you need a place to stay. Give them a quick little Google search, Hilton Garden Inn. They will treat you well. Their amenities are fantastic. Their staff is super friendly, and the place is clean and lovely, and hot tub's great.
Yeah, buddy.
So is the pool. So, all right, let's move on. So we started to mention in part 1 in the first segment that that the plant that we consume, that we now still call marijuana, is 10 times as potent as the plant that they were consuming or using in the 60s.
And that's just,
That's
The
the
plant.
plant, right?
I mean, they have, this thing is a science.
It's a genetically freakish plant.
And that's not even getting into what we're about to get into, how they get upwards of 99% THC.
So here we go. So the article points out that, first of all, many of the cannabis products that people purchase in dispensaries contain no actual plant matter. Okay, it's all natural. There's no plant matter in that stuff, some of that
It's
stuff
no
at
longer
all.
all natural.
Right? And so what happens is they're pulverizing marijuana. They put it into a tube and they run a bunch of chemicals through it: butane, propane, ethanol, carbon dioxide. And that separates the THC from the rest of the plant. And then the end product of that is a wax. And that wax can be 70 to 80% THC.
Doesn't
Whoa.
stop there.
We've just gone from the 60s at 2% to 70 to 80%.
And it doesn't stop there.
The wax is the wax can be put into a vacuum oven and further concentrated into oils that can be somewhere between 95 and 99% THC. This stuff is known as dabs, and that is what people are putting into vape pens. You're now talking about 99% THC, 50 times more potent than the plant that hippies were smoking in the 60s.
And the only thing I can think of is the poor people that don't know, right? Like if you don't know levels and if you don't know amounts, if I'm standing around and we're all vaping, okay, let's all pretend that we're teenagers, early 20s, and we're all standing around vaping, and I have a dab pen, dab, am I saying that right?
Yeah, Deb.
I have a dab pen, and you all
DAP or DAB?
B
Dab.
with a B.
Dab.
dab. Okay, I have a dab pen, and you're like, oh, hey, let me try some of that, right? Because you're used to smoking the 20% THC,
Right.
and now in my dab pen, I have 99% THC, and you smoke it like you're used to smoking that 20%. You're gonna think you're gonna die. In fact, one of the feedback that I got from somebody who was not pro marijuana in one of my 3 focus groups, we'll call them focus groups, was that he actually had that experience. He didn't know the amounts. He took, prior tense. He took a drag off of somebody else's dab, and he said, "I literally thought I was going to die."
So that I like that because that leads to where I want to go next for just a second, and that is, first of all, article points out if you're over 30 and you used to smoke weed when you were a teenager, strongest you ever smoked was probably 20%. Well, teenagers now are using a product that's called dabs that's 3, 4, or 5 times more potent than that, and often doing it multiple times a day. At that level of potency, the impact it has on the brain is a completely different category than what we used to get. It's
Than
the
the hippies
impacts
at
on the
2%.
brain are right. I mean, it's unbelievable, right? The article says if you've ever smoked a bowl and become irrationally anxious that everyone is staring at you and knows you're high, what you experienced was a mild symptom of cannabis-induced psychosis. And if you keep about 40, it says there's a study that showed that about 40% of people react that way. If you keep smoking after a reaction like that, your chances of becoming permanently psychotic
Or other mental health
are
things
about-
such as bipolar, schizophrenia. Yeah,
Sure, but psychosis is the big one, right?
sure.
There was a number of studies out of there were 2 Danish studies and a massive study from Finland that put your chances at close to 50% of becoming permanently mentally disabled
Some
because
sort
of
of
schizophrenia
disorder.
or bipolar or whatever.
Well,
right?
and we know too, a big part of the education that I did, going after my education to become a substance abuse counselor, looked at, regardless of whether you're pro or you're anti marijuana, THC, fill in the blank, whatever you know it as, there's absolute evidence that if you have some kind of pre-genetic disposition to schizophrenia, bipolar, any type of mental health, it will bring the onset on so much faster.
Right.
So instead of developing schizophrenia later in life, let's say 40s, 50s, 60s, you're more likely to develop it at an earlier age because, you have that genetic cursor, and then introduce environment, THC, it's going to make the onset that much faster. There's a lot of studies out there that show that.
Yeah.
So even if you look at this and you go, this is all just a scare tactic, there is ample amount of studies that have showed it's going to develop or bring on the onset quicker.
Yeah, for sure. They quoted an expert on psychotic disorders, Dr. Christine Miller, and she said 1 out of every 20 daily users can expect to develop schizophrenia if they don't quit. We're not talking about daily dab users. We're talking about daily marijuana users.
Yeah.
1 out of 20. You got a 5% chance of developing schizophrenia if you smoke daily or use marijuana daily for any serious length of time.
And, if you're listening to this, and kind of like in my focus group or one of the groups that I did this week, one of the feedback that a genius had was, well, then just don't buy it from a store or a dispensary. Get it from John Doe down the street. Here's a scary thing about that the debate went to. They're putting fentanyl and meth and all
for
kinds
sure.
of things inside marijuana. And they're lacing it to create it to become
sure.
more addictive. So that's not really the answer either.
Well, buying it in a store, at least you're getting pretty much just straight THC,
Right.
right? You're not getting any adulterants. Nobody cut some baby powder in there. Nobody stuck some bath salts in there. Nobody stuck some fentanyl in there.
Right.
So, yeah, when you say genius, it reminded me of something, and that's not in this article, but
But that's the way people think.
there was a super large study out of New Zealand that showed that heavy daily users, if they used most days for 5 years, drops your IQ by about 8 points, which is a significant drop.
Well, and did you know that heavy users can be considered somebody that smokes 2 times a week? That puts them in the dependent cannabis use disorder.
Right.
That will put you in the severe category of cannabis use disorder.
Right.
If you smoke twice per week.
Right.
So you're talking about daily users.
Right.
Yeah, I mean it's a scary thought.
Yeah, unbelievable.
All right, what do you think about, Doc, though, when it says, but quitting THC products but quitting THC products of that potency is almost impossible. So it said, comparing this addictive power to tobacco, the day of marijuana addiction being merely psychological are over.
I think that
I mean, you do detoxes, right?
Yeah,
you
I think
detox people.
I think that second point is much more valuable than that first point. The first point where she says that quitting THC products of that potency is almost impossible. That's not true. That's just not true. It's harder. It's harder than it was when it was 2% THC. There's no question. But almost impossible, that's not true.
Do you think?
But the point that is true is there now is, because of the potency of the THC, there now is an actual physical withdrawal symptoms from quitting marijuana.
That was going to be my next question, right? Because one of the things in the groups that we talked about that a lot of the clients balked at or had something to say about was it talks about a physical dependency. With that high of a THC level in daily use, there's some type of physical dependency. And everybody's like, you can't get physically addicted to marijuana. It's a mental thing. That's not what you're seeing. You've actually seen people that have been physically addicted. And it talks about it in here. Some of the withdrawal symptoms include irritability, anger, anxiety, massive cravings, can't sleep, can't eat. I mean, a lot of those sound psychological to me, but you're saying there is a physical dependency?
There is a physical dependency, and some of the proof of that. So about 6 or 7 years ago, I was reading a study so there is a marijuana blocker. It's experimental. It's not approved as a medication or anything yet. But you can give that marijuana blocker to people, and they go into a fairly significant physical withdrawal. The reason people aren't feeling physical withdrawals as much is that THC, when you smoke it or when you use it at all chronically, is stored in fat cells. And so when you stop using it, it slowly leaches out of fat cells, which gives you sort of your own physiological weaning process, which is what we do with other drugs in detox. You kind of slowly wean yourself, even though you quit abruptly, because it's stored in fat cells and it comes out slowly.
And that's why people can test positive for marijuana up to
weeks and months sometimes.
Yeah, weeks and months,
depending on how much they were using, how frankly how many fat. I mean, how overweight they are, and then for how long they used it. The longer you use it, the longer it's going to take to get out of your system.
All right, let's jump into. We got about 13 minutes left here. There was a teenager. It talks about in the article who suffered from depression and anxiety. He would use THC products because society tells us now that it's a medication for that to get rid of the depression and anxiety. This, unfortunately, this teenager ended up taking his own life. And his dad talks about just the craziness of having it not being monitored. And I think that's my biggest problem, right? Number one, I think there needs to be more research. Number two, I think that the regulations need to be a lot tighter. This doctor's recommendation. Okay, where are we at? Yeah. Since marijuana is still considered a Schedule I controlled substance by the federal government, there's no such thing as a prescription, quote unquote, for medical cannabis. Instead, you get a recommendation from a physician. You want to go ahead and take over?
Well, I'll take over, but I'm not gonna go right to that next paragraph. I'm going to tell what happens.
Okay.
So the doctor gives you a recommendation. In Utah, you have to go to somebody who's actually certified to give you this recommendation. They give you a recommendation for marijuana, which is sort of a prescription, except you don't take that to the pharmacy. You take it to a dispensary, and then the dispensary essentially decides how much you get, right? Not a doctor. How they decide how potent it is, how much you can buy, and they recommend oh, it's for sleep, let's do this product, or let's do this product, or let's do this formulation.
Yeah.
And that's all done by sometimes high school graduates, sometimes not high school graduates. Now, I'm not trying to demean anybody that works at a dispensary. They don't have very much medical training usually. They're for sure not pharmacists.
They just know the different strands.
Right. They know
Stevia and
marijuana well.
indica,
Like
right?
if you want a good recommendation, they know the plant well. I'll give you that. But they don't know medicine very well.
Yeah.
Right? And your pharmacist knows a whole lot of medicine.
Right.
So
Great point.
it's a completely different process. It goes on to say the doctor's recommendation typically has no expiration, no dose, no duration, and no change across state lines. It's basically take as much as you want, as often as you want, until you feel what you want.
Which is crazy.
Yep.
No other medication out there
Works that way.
works that way.
Right,
Yeah.
for sure.
The other thing that I liked that he pointed out was once you get the recommendation, it's not like you go back to be monitored for your levels, right? Like there's no controlled amount. Like it just said, take as much as you want, as
Right.
often as you want. And so you don't have to follow, like if you give me a prescription for something,
Sure, a high blood pressure medication.
thank you. Typically I have to schedule a follow-up interview to get refills at a certain point, depending
Right.
on
I want to
how-
see you to see if it worked.
Right. With
Right.
that doesn't exist in this quote unquote medical.
Yeah. I'll give my
Card.
patients, so I see a fair amount of mental health. I'll give my patients an antidepressant. I want to see them in a few weeks to see if they're having side effects, if the medication is working, if they're still taking it. You know, we want to do that. There's just really none of that with marijuana, for sure.
It goes on to say these products are all sold as quote unquote medicine, even though none of them is FDA approved. And although it's illegal for anyone without a medical degree to offer medical advice, dispensary bud tenders, quote unquote, do it all the time.
Bud tenders.
Yeah.
That's your pharmacist, a bud tender.
Their advice is completely evidence free because no evidence exists that the specific product they're selling has any medical value.
Oh, very
Again, there needs to be
interesting, right?
more research. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting right there. I think I think there's another couple of quotes here from doctors. First of all, Dr. Lev, who is an addiction psychiatrist, it's insulting to the medical profession. They've hijacked the word medical. This is not medicine, Dr. Stoit said. This is high potency this high potency THC has not been studied as medicine, but because it's allowed to be heavily marketed and advertised as medicine, people believe it's safe. Because we're treating it like a medicine, people think, well, it's totally safe. Also, people are under the delusion of this is a medicine. It's completely natural. It comes from the earth. They're under that sort of delusion, which is clearly not true. Now, when you take a medicine for a chronic problem, you take it every day. So sometimes you take it all day long, and if the medicine happens to have an addictive component in it, guess what? You're addicted to it. If you're taking it all day, every day, you're going to get addicted to it.
Sure, that's how I got addicted to opiates.
Right. You get addicted to it, and based on what we just talked about earlier, you have a 1 in 20 chance of developing schizophrenia.
Yeah.
The FDA might not approve a drug like that.
Probably.
If
not.
I brought a drug to market for depression, but it had a 1 in 20 chance of converting depressed patients into schizophrenics, I might not get approval for that medication.
That 1 in 20 chance being a reference to earlier in this article.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, where a physician said if you smoke daily and don't quit, you're going to have a 1 in 20 chance of becoming schizophrenic.
Basically, we got less than 10 minutes here. I'd
Yeah.
like to just open it up for discussion, right? So
Okay.
if you want to read the article, it was on Tablet Magazine. Again, the title is How Weed Became the New Oxycontin. Check it out.
Yeah.
So-
if you just Google how weed became the new Oxycontin, you'll get to it.
It's an interesting article. It really is. Here's for me, the skeptic side comes in and says this. Here's what it's all about. The almighty dollar.
For sure.
Right? I mean, that basically is one of the top products that are illegally brought into this country that are moneymakers is marijuana.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, somebody had to sit back and go, okay, if they're willing to go through all these things for this much money, if we just opened it up for recreational use and medical use. And again, I find it pretty interesting that the people who did big tobacco, big pharma, are now investors, and it talks about that in the second half of this article that we're not going to get to, are now throwing money into the marijuana industry,
Right.
growing
Right.
dispensaries. So, yeah, to me that's pretty evidence in my mind that I feel like now that I've read the whole article, the title makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think your point that you're trying to bring forth is this. One of the things that we hope our government does for us, one of the things that one of government's jobs, I think, is to protect its citizens, right? Well, they see that some of its citizens are smoking marijuana, and they're getting it illegally. And so rather than protect the citizens, the government scratches their head and says, hey, people are smoking marijuana, but we're not getting any tax revenue off of this. So if we make it legal, we can get tax revenue off of this.
Do you think it's the government though, or well, I guess even if it's just state, it would still be part of the
It's
government
government,
because
right.
the federal government still has a very strong stance against
sure.
it. In fact, a lot of people that
For sure, but
have
they're looking the other
dispensaries-
way.
right, yeah,
It's a Schedule I controlled substance, which means it's illegal,
and it
but
becomes
everybody looks the other way.
and it's in Schedule 1. Schedule 1 we know means has no medical. The
No
federal
medical value.
government is ruling it as no medical
No medical value at all.
value.
Highly addictive, no medical value. And so what do we do with that? We take a vote on it and decide it's a medicine. Kind of weird how that all came about.
To be fair, there are some properties like if you research Charlotte's Web, like I referred to earlier. But again, I want to decipher. So you have a marijuana plant, right?
Right.
There's two different forms or strands. And listen, if you're wanting to listen to a good podcast besides ours, because we know there's some other good ones out there, Huberman Lab, he just came out with, he's a neuroscientist, does research, very educated dude. He did an episode called "The Effects of Cannabis on the Brain and Body," and this is where I learned this from, so I got to cite him. He talks about how there's sativa, which is like going to give you energy, and that 40% that we talked about earlier in this article comes from using that strand.
Right.
It can cause paranoia, right? It can cause some psychosis, and then there's indica, and indica is more of like your bedtime, fall asleep. Within both of those two strands, there's a balance of THC and CBD.
Right.
Now, most of the studies that they found when they have done studies on this is the medical properties lie in the CBD, not necessarily the THC. So
Sure.
the non-psychoactive component to the plant is where a lot of the benefits come from.
Sure.
That's why they do
CBD
hemp
relieves
oils.
pain.
Right.
THC doesn't really relieve pain very well.
So to be completely fair, and when I say earlier, I'm on the fence and I feel like there just needs to be more research. It's not because I'm, pro hippie. Let's all go out to a dispensary, buy some dab pens and get toasty. It's more of there is some type of interesting component to this in the CBD that I feel like needs to be pursued a little bit further because listen, if somebody's having seizures, epilepsy, and they're able to take this hemp oil, which from what I understand has very low THC, maybe even none, and high CBD properties, and they're able to no longer have seizures. In my mind, there needs to be a little bit more research done. What do you think?
Sure. I agree. That many of our medicines come from plants. Most of our medicines come from plants. Now, in this day and age, there's more and more synthetic stuff coming out, but originally all medications came from plants. Strychnine's from a plant, and everything that we ever got was from a plant.
And even a lot of the illegal substances we touched on earlier in this podcast come from a plant, have
Absolutely.
an origin.
These things all came from plants, and this thing originally was a plant. Now, we've made it not a plant by turning it into wax and oil, but it's originally from a plant. Plants have some medicinal qualities, and there are medicinal qualities to the marijuana plant.
Here's the other line I want to draw. in the industry that we work in, I feel like I don't see a whole lot of people having epileptic episodes. Right? Like the population that we work with, look, it's a mind-altering substance. If you have glaucoma, if you've got anxiety, there are other ways for somebody with an addictive brain to treat those symptoms other than using. So in other words, check your intention. If your intention is to just get high, I mean,
but the people that are defending this the most in a group, for example, that you run at a treatment center, let's say, the people that really are the pro-marijuana people in that setting are really talking about the addictive qualities of the plant.
Sure.
They're talking about the fact that that plant releases dopamine from your midbrain, which we've talked about on this podcast 100 times. THC does that. They're not talking about preventing seizures. They're not defending it so vigorously because it might prevent seizures. They're talking about it so vehemently and vigorously because it releases dopamine from their midbrains, and that's why they're fighting tooth and nail to keep it.
And I got to give a plug. I love our clients. Not all of them were pro, right? There was a lot of them in there that were like, look, if it's mind altering, I don't want to have anything to do with it.
Oh, for sure.
Like I've gotten to this point, and I like being in recovery. I like having a clear mind. I don't want to mess that up with anything. And I think also, whether it's a gateway drug or not, anytime a relapse happens, what is it, this statistic? 60 to 80% of relapses, you don't relapse on your drug of choice.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
Your brain convinces you, oh, I'm a heroin addict, I can drink alcohol.
Right.
Or I'm a heroin addict, I can smoke pot.
Yep. Hey.
However, you're going to eventually work your way back into that.
Guess what?
We're out of time.
We're out of time. Weed, the new OxyContin. Thanks for listening, and thanks for our sponsors. And this has been episode 94 of We Do Recover with Jared Miller. And
97. Can you believe we've done 97?
I said 94. I meant 97, yeah.
I hope you have a good weekend.
I will, and we'll see you next week or 2 weeks from now. I'll be down 2 weeks from now.
Next week, we're going to try to get one in.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We'll figure it out.
See you next week for episode 98. Thanks, Doc.
Don't smoke pot.
Thank you for joining us today on We Do Recover with Jared Miller.
Help us spread our message of hope. Like, comment, and share.
If you have any topics or ideas for future shows, please share that on our Facebook page.
That Facebook page is We Do Recover with Jared Miller. If you or a loved one needs help, please reach out to us. Again, thank you for listening. Brought to you by Steps Recovery Center and the St. George Hilton Garden Inn. This has been a production from a podcast studio.